It's a very important question because liturgy is the center of Christian life. We cannot live without liturgy, and liturgy is the way we enter into a very specific and wonderful and deep relationship with God. But liturgy is the celebration of the passion, death, and resurrection of Christ. Is a celebration, therefore, of the sacraments. Now, when we think about liturgy, of course, the first thing that comes to our mind is probably the celebration, the ceremonies, celebrations, rituals, rubrics that we find when we go to church or people who go to other religions. But we are talking here specifically of Christian liturgy. Of course, there are celebrations, there are ceremonies, there are rituals, rubrics that you have to follow. Priests, when the priest celebrates the liturgy, he has to do something, he has to say some things, some words. But this is not really the center of the liturgy, but it's just kind of some characteristics, important characteristics of the liturgy. So important that we have to respect them. We cannot just escape these kind of rituals, but we have to be faithful to the ritual. But the liturgy goes beyond that. The spirit of the liturgy, okay, is this contact that we have with the transcendental God, with the God who, being transcendental, has become one of us, has become flesh, has become a human being. So we celebrate, we rejoice in what Jesus Christ did in his life, in his passion, in his cross, in his resurrection. And not only that, because that happened in the past, but we actually partake in this reality. You see, when we think in the liturgy, almost always we think in something that happened 2,000 years ago, you know, the death of Christ, the resurrection, and now we are kind of remembering something that happened in the past. But that's not the liturgy at all. The liturgy is actually the divine action that makes present today, here, in this very moment, what happened in the past. Or, if you want to put it in other words, it's actually the liturgy, the possibility for us to go back in time, to encounter Jesus Christ, and to partake in his cross and his resurrection. Many people, I remember when I was a child, I always kind of thought in the possibility to go back in time and meeting Jesus Christ and kind of listening to his words personally. You know, I always thought that would have been wonderful to be able to do that. Well, the liturgy enabled you to do something like that. It's like this is a bad example, of course, but it's like a time machine through which you can go back in time, but not really, it's not really back in time, but it's really in eternity. You enter into eternity. You become a participant in eternity. When you go to Mass, when you celebrate the sacraments, you are not just remembering something that happened in the past, but you are actually entering into eternity. The liturgy is a place where time and eternity come together, we could say. So eternity comes to us, and we are entering into contact with eternity. This is very important. And therefore, we are talking about a great mystery here. We're not talking about celebrations, ceremonies, rituals, rubrics, something that we make, something that we plan. You know, we see in many parishes today, these planifications of the liturgy, liturgical committee. We sit down around the table and we decide what we're going to do or what we are not going to do in the liturgy. And sometimes this is necessary. However, this cannot be the main part of the liturgy, because the liturgy doesn't depend on a group of people. It doesn't depend on ingrained ideas. It depends on Christ, on God. It's a celebration of the mystery of God. And therefore, we have our part in the liturgy, but mainly is God the one who takes over in the liturgy. When you go to a liturgy, to the celebration of the Mass, to the celebration of baptism, to the celebration of any of the sacraments, and you see that everything is about human beings, everything is about the choir, everything is about the person, everything is about the priest, everything is about human beings, when in the end the only thing that you can think of is, oh, how beautiful is the liturgy because they did a good job. The liturgical committee did a good job, or the priest did a good job, or the choir did a good job. Then the liturgy really did not take place fully in that church. in that community. Because the liturgy is not the private property of anyone, but is the celebration of eternity, the celebration of the cross of Christ. Therefore, Christ is the center. God must be the center, not us. Unfortunately, in the last 40 or 50 years, we haven't been catechized well enough in this regard. We have, many people have told us that liturgy is about participating and doing things and being involved and understanding everything, and that's not a liturgy at all. Of course, we have to be able to understand what's going on, but we cannot ever understand totally the mystery of Christ, because the mystery cannot be totally understood by human beings. We must let ourselves be embraced by the mystery of God, be totally possessed by the mystery of God, and therefore it is true that we have to actively participate in the liturgy, but it is really God, the one who we should be focused on the liturgy, in His action. What is He doing? Something is happening in the altar. Something is happening on the altar that goes beyond the priest, goes beyond the altar servers, goes beyond our congregation, our singing. All these things are beautiful and should be promoted and improved, but they are not the most important thing in the liturgy. The most important element in the liturgy is the presence of somebody who is there and who have become close to us, of course, through the incarnation and through the sacraments, but who still is the totaliter aliter, the holy other, the one who is beyond what you can think, beyond what you can imagine, and yet who has become closer to us to help us, to love us, to give us His mercy. When you enter into the liturgy, that's what you have to have in your mind. Not so much what you are going to do, not so much what you are going to bring, but what God is going to do in that very moment. So the liturgy is this contact, this union, this meeting, if you want, between time and eternity. We go back in time, if you want. And time, the time of Jesus, the crucifixion, the resurrection, comes to us. In other words, we partake in eternity. It's like a praxis, if you want, of heaven. You know, heaven is this this liturgy without end. That's what we will do in heaven. If, for example, many people say, well, you know, I am a little bored in the liturgy. Well, then what are you going to do in heaven? Because heaven is nothing else but a heavenly liturgy, where God is the center and we are worshippers of God. When we are surrounding God to worship Him, and then we become happy by that very action. So let us think about this important element. I know that the liturgy is more than what I have said here, but I think I have mentioned the main part, the most important part, which is the presence of the mystery of God. When we go to Mass, when we go to the celebration of the sacraments, we are actually stepping into the mystery of God. If you are aware of this reality, and then you are participating, actively participating in the liturgy. If you are not aware of that and you think that the liturgy is just what we do, what we celebrate, and what we remember, then you are not really understanding the spirit, the most important element, the main idea of the liturgy, especially the Christian liturgy.